Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I hope you guys are having a super awesome day. Welcome to the Childcare Business Growth Podcast. So I'm very excited today to be joined by a very good friend of mine, Renee Williams. So Renee, thank you for being here. You
Thanks
are
for having me.
also known as the state inspector, or how else are people, what's your other AKAs that people
The
use
state lady.
now? So tell everyone, if you don't mind, I love when we have a chat because some of the things you talk about are things that not only have we experienced in our business, but also things that I speak to owners about all the time. And later on the conversation, I'm going to bring up some examples of even a conversation I had with someone yesterday. But tell everyone, if you don't mind, for those that are new, tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you help people.
Okay. My name is Ronnie Williams. I am based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a former childcare licensing consultant. Prior to becoming a state lady, I actually worked inside of a childcare center as a lead Georgia pre-K teacher. While in that role, I was always the teacher that would just go into other people's classrooms, help with the front desk, help with the bus runs. I literally tried to learn every aspect of the center and eventually moved into management. After working in management for a while, I did get very acquainted with my state lady because she came very frequently. You'll hear me joke about it, about how much she came, but one thing about state is just because state comes to your center a lot, it doesn't mean your center is bad, right? Some
Sure.
centers just get more calls than others because of maybe they have a higher capacity, maybe they have more sensitive parents, maybe they just have more children where things happen. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're bad, you just may get a lot more visits. And I worked at a center that got a lot of visits. We
Okay.
weren't always substantiated or found guilty of doing anything wrong, but she came a lot. And from seeing her on an almost monthly basis, I learned a little bit more about her, and I learned we went to the same school. So after talking to her for a few visits, I eventually got the courage to apply, and I started off as a family daycare consultant. And then eventually my caseload was blended, and that's when I took on family childcare, group childcare, which is basically 18 to 6, which is Georgia's family daycare cutoff, and
Yep.
then 18 and larger, which is a commercial childcare setting. So anything that is just larger than 18 was considered a childcare learning center.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So tell, if we can, then let's touch on what are some of the misconceptions or worries around, the state coming to you. We've talked a lot about these in the past, but what are some of the big things that people worry about or they concern about every day?
One is we're going to shut you down. That's always the biggest one. One ding and you're done. One mistake doesn't constitute you getting shut down. Honestly, two or three mistakes don't constitute you being shut down. It honestly depends on what you did. And as much as I hate to always be the morbid one when I present, but it's death. It's death, serious injury, some type of extra malice harm to a child. Those are things that cause you to get shut down. And in some cases, if we're being honest, that's not always the deal breaker. You can harm a child, or someone in your staff could harm a child. But depending on how the center responds to it, that could be the thing that helps you keep your program. If you try to hide it, try to
Yeah.
lie about it, that might be how you lose your program, not the actual malice act. So let's just say, I know like losing a child is always, and when I say lose, like you left them on your playground, or you left them in a room, or you left them on a field trip. It happens. It's bad. But that's not necessarily grounds to lose your license. A person did it, right? That may be grounds for you to lose that person as an
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
employee,
Yeah.
but that may not be grounds to lose your business. You may get a fine. You may get a restriction on your license where you can't do field trips anymore, or you can't transport anymore, but that's not the actual revocation, shutdown, closure of your business. So that's the biggest one, being shut down. You have to do something really bad to be shut down, like that, something really bad. And I think the other thing is you think your state person hates you, and
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah.
Their job is to look for things that are wrong. Like I know I always get stopped, and I'm told she just looks for things that are wrong. That's her job.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is her job, to find things that are wrong. Just like, the food inspector, they go into these restaurants and they
Exactly.
look
I
for
get that.
things out of code. childcare is no different. We're looking for things that are wrong because we want you to correct them. You may be doing a ton of things right. And yes, your state person could comment on the things that you're doing right. But that's not why she's there.
Yeah.
If you want support and you want uplifting, you might want to get a coach for that, like, but your state person is not their job to praise you. It's their job to ensure that the children in care are safe. They don't hate you, but they're focused. You're
Yeah,
trying to
totally.
look and see what's going on. And there's so many programs that are hiding things or have major things wrong. And being distracted could cause you to miss it. And I know when I was a state consultant, the last thing I wanted was one of my programs to be on the news or to be on Instagram or to be on some type of blog that something happened and I was just there and I missed it.
And I think you're totally right. From my perspective, I think sometimes people, as you say, they worry that they purposely trying to find something, but ultimately, as you say, it's their conscience here that, heaven forbid, something did happen. It's those guys that actually didn't prevent that happening in the first place. Now, I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were talking about, they haven't long had been given the license, and the director, for example, walked out of the room to answer a phone call because she couldn't hear; it was too loud in the room. Okay, she walked out, which meant then when the door went, she went to answer the door. It's the state. She's obviously left the room out of ratio. Okay,
Yes.
now. And this is one of the things I've always found, that no matter what training, no matter what systems you put in place as an owner, you can never deal with, to a certain extent, human error or people not following the process. What's your thoughts around that? How can you demonstrate? And I've got my own ideas of things we've done, but how can someone demonstrate to you that if that happened, that you're competent, that at least the owner did have the right systems or processes, but actually just that one person didn't follow it? What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, one thing would state you can't speculate, you have to believe that people are just operating how they naturally would,
Okay.
because assumptions can get you in going down the wrong lane. But one of the things that I think that happens when you constantly operate honestly in compliance, when your mind is always like, I got to do the right thing, I got to do the right thing, naturally you're going to do the right thing even if it looks a little rocky, right? So let's just say, like, that you have a certain ratio to maintain. Like, if someone knocks on the door or the phone rings or whatever, you grab enough kids with you to make sure that you stay in ratio. Or like, there's so many ways that you can try to compromise the rule and still stay in compliance. So I'll use myself as an example. When I used to work in a classroom, like, I remember, like, it would never fail. I use this in my trainings all the time. Someone had to go to the bathroom while we're on the playground. I
Yeah.
never made it a habit to just take that one child. I took enough children with me to the bathroom to make sure that my co-teacher was never out of ratio.
Totally. Yeah.
You always have, like, I always tell people, don't learn the shortcut until you've mastered the real way.
Oh,
Because
nice.
when state comes, you're not going to be able to shortcut it. And if you don't know the real way, you honestly don't know the shortcut because you don't know the real way, right? You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
can't,
I totally get
like
it. Yeah.
math, you can't just get to the answer if you really never really learned the steps to get to the final answer. So even if someone shows you the shortcut, you still don't really grasp it because you never really learned the process of how to do it.
Yeah.
And so
I love
one of
that.
the things that people have to realize is it's not state's job to have empathy because you have a new business, or because 4 of your teachers called out. That's not anything that they can give you leeway on, because if a child got lost and you're on the news, the first thing someone's going to say is, my state lady knew that I was short staffed and she said it was okay just this one day.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
when a
Totally.
child gets hurt, you and that state lady have to live with the guilt that something happened to that child. And I think a lot of times, if we're being honest, when you get in trouble for something one time, you never really let that be your thing again. You know,
Switch
to this day, the place you got your first speeding ticket, you still break there.
Yeah.
You still break in that same,
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
got
Totally.
that first speeding ticket, you still go like, I got a ticket here 10 years ago,
Yeah.
but you're
Never gonna
never
do
going to not know the speed limit on that road because you got a ticket once. If you got dinged and reprimanded for ratios, you're probably never going to let ratios be your thing again, because now that's your thing. Like I shared at your conference, I did an infant death as my first investigation.
Oh, yeah.
I was crazy about SIDS in every single center that I went to. I'm flipping mattresses, pulling sheets, checking feet. Like I'm checking the tape on the side of the crib, the inches in between the bars. That becomes your thing. So I think a lot of times owners sometimes have to not take it so personal. I get
Personal.
it. You've invested all of your money. You're sleeping here. You're spending 20 hours a day in your program. State comes unannounced. And the 1 minute where you didn't have it together, that's when they show up. And here they come, pointing things out. But that's their job. And in that 1 minute that you weren't ready, 1 minute that you weren't ready. And you have to be honest about it.
Yeah. Do you know, I love the fact there of your relatable story that you just mentioned about obviously the infant death, because I think you're right. A lot of people don't see it from that perspective. They that one sentence you've just said there alone totally should change people's perspective of your role in terms of what you do. I just think that that's a massive takeaway. One of the ones I love, and we're going to ask you about this now because you talked about this before. And whenever I talk about staff onboarding, I talk about you and the example you shared. And one of the things we spoke about last time, you spoke about the importance of onboarding new team members. And we often speak about that people, come to the industry, maybe they're new to the industry, or maybe, they're new to your business. And we overwhelm them. We throw so much at them in the first couple of weeks that one of two things happen. They either crumble under the pressure and you end up getting rid of them, or they leave and walk out because it's just too much.
Never come back from lunch.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, where did they go? Yeah, that was a long lunch break. And then from your perspective, you touched on something. What can you just tell everyone what your thoughts were around that?
One is, again, being honest with yourself. You know that you need a teacher. You know that you're desperate for the teacher, but it's not the teacher's fault, right? And taking the time to properly orientate them and train them to be in a room and train every person as if they know nothing. Honestly, you can't assume that what they've learned at another center even equates to what you permit or allow in your center.
Yep.
Go through the actual onboard, create one if you don't have one. A lot of states have orientation processes that they share. Like I know in Georgia, there is an orientation checklist. Go through each bullet point with your team. Don't overwhelm them in that one day and just go through everything. That's not fair. That's a lot of information for someone to honestly dump on you.
Yeah.
But have a training plan for them. Maybe put them with a seasoned teacher. Let them have time with you. Let them have time with your director. Let them have time with the teacher in another room that's not their co-teacher. Let them do some trainings online. Make sure that you have training scheduled each month or every other month. Have staff meetings. Like make sure that they're always learning.
Yeah.
Because that's how we all do. No one really learns from a dump. Like you're just overwhelmed. After a while, you're like, I can't remember all this. You start doubting yourself and you set them up to fail. And honestly, you set yourself up to fail because you're probably tired from dumping on that person in a time span like that. So just teach them over time. And again, have a list so you know what you have taught them on. Follow up, make sure that they're understanding, and not just from question, observation. Watch them in their room. Have the other person that's in the room with them kind of keep an eye out on them when they're doing diaper changes or hand washing or a circle time activity. Let learning be a continuous thing. All of us can say in childcare, we learn something new every day. No one mastered childcare in a month.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly, none of us mastered in a year. My degree is in child development, and I have so many bloopers of my first year as a teacher.
Yeah.
You're always learning. No one's mastered it. A CDA doesn't make you a master. A bachelor's doesn't make you a master. A master's doesn't make you a master. Yeah, you're so knowledgeable, but those real live in-person interactions with children and their families, those degrees give you support, but they don't give you the full answer. And you want to make sure that you are giving people tools, not just hammers, nails, screwdrivers, paper, pen, knowledge. Like you give people tools to be successful.
I remember there was one other thing you touched on was around, we're talking about particularly the first couple of weeks of onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
So let's imagine, I don't know, even if they're brand new to the industry, or for example, they're coming in from another center. I remember you spoke specifically about stop obviously overloading them, but you talked specifically about what's the basic things you would expect them to know. So if you're going in and you know maybe this is a new employee or there's someone just newly qualified and they're coming into that center, from your perspective, what would you expect them to know within their first couple of weeks?
Health, safety, because that's really what the parents care about. You
Exactly.
ask any parent in a tour, what do you want from your child? They want to make sure their kid is safe. They want to make sure their kid gets food. They're like, don't give them too much junk. And they always say learning last, if we're being honest. And
Yeah.
some don't honestly even mention the learning. They
No.
normally pick the learning when they get like pre-K age.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Everyone wants their child to be healthy and safe. So making sure people know the ratios. And I know sometimes it's hard to remember those numbers, especially if you're accredited versus state guidelines. Have somewhere in every classroom where information is available. Have allergies, have ratios, have the schedule,
Yeah.
have, a place where the children's names are listed. Like just have tools in place where people can, one, be safe,
Yeah.
when it's time to go outside, teaching them how to count the kids, how to look for the ones that hide, how to have best practices to make sure that you're counting them, whether you have tadpoles or kangaroo time or any of these tools, making sure that they know how to use them and that they're aware of what's necessary for using the tool. Because a lot of times, even if you have the tablet, if you don't know how many kids you're supposed to have, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then just ways to keep them safe: hand washing, proper diaper changes, effective ways to disinfect, health and safety. As long as the kid's not coming home with green snot every week, no scratches or bangs, and they're not lost, most parents are going to come back next week. They don't care that, they were a little dirty or
Yeah,
they
totally.
still don't know their colors. If their kid comes back and they're happy, they're clean, they're safe, you have a parent, you have a
Yeah.
family that will come back the next week. But they can't be dirty and scraped up, like they can't. You got to give the parents something, and it's meeting those basic needs: safe, healthy, ratios, providing supervision, making sure that, they're outside playing with the toys correctly. They're playing with the equipment appropriately. Their faces are being cleaned. Their bodies are being cleaned. Diapers are being thrown away and the surfaces are disinfected correctly. Those are the main things: health, safety. Everything else, anecdotal notes or whatever else, those things come with time.
I remember you because I actually talked about this. We did a mastermind training in Tampa last week, and
Mm-hmm.
we were sitting down with all our clients, talking about the importance of your onboarding and all, I would talk a lot of that. They say to us, "Oh, I've got so much they need to know in the first couple of weeks." So look, I'm going to go back to the points that I remember from your session. I say the basic things. You just, it's all well and good you teaching them everything else about the curriculum and whatever else you do and all the amazing events and everything else. But ultimately, if the state walk in and that person hasn't washed their hands effectively or the safety's not in place, those are the fundamentals that, number one, are going to let you down. Number two is going to encourage them to dig even further.
Right.
And it's kind of like a light bulb to people to think, oh, yeah, you're probably right. I'm throwing too much at that person. And then it's like, oh, that's probably why they left, because, it's like too much. Even, another big one we talked a lot about was challenging behavior. That's another big one. A lot of people don't know how to deal with children with challenging behavior.
Right.
And that can also encourage newbies to potentially leave because they haven't been taught the basics of how to deal with that. So I think that's a critical one. Another big one I'm going to touch on, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. One of the things I talked about previously was some states can do this. We can do this in the UK. Other countries can do this as well. But sometimes companies are forced where they need to bring in agency staff, people to help out because they're short staffed. Now, I know a lot of states don't allow that, but there are some states that do allow that, particularly here in the UK. And one of the biggest challenges people have is bringing those team members, those part-times, or whether they're in just for the day, up to speed as much as possible to make
Right.
sure that, they do at least the basics. And one of the things we've implemented a lot for a lot of clients that we've talked about before is whenever someone comes in part-time or someone comes in to help out, we have all the information online. So they scan a QR code, they
Right.
go to a page that briefs them on every single thing they need to know. So safety in the room, safeguarding officers, fire evacuation, basic hygiene, routine, medical conditions, everything is there. But then they also have to go through it and they sign in data. Because what I've seen a lot sometimes, and I understand why people do it, but someone turns up, say, hey, you're the cover staff for today. Great. Here's the room. There you go.
There you
And it's
go.
like throw them in the deep end. And it's a huge problem because then, as you talk about, let's imagine the state turn up on that day and that person's not briefed enough.
They don't even know the kid's name.
Exactly. And there's no process in place. They don't know, you haven't got documentation to show you've onboarded them. And I know your time's tight, but ultimately you've got to have some type of process or system to show that you have given at least the basics. So that's one thing we're rolling out now. But even another one, I'm going to touch on this really quickly. Even simple things I see, for example, we had a client based in Canada, and he said, I've never got any time to do anything. I said, well, give me some examples of what you've done today. And one of them was, the team came to me twice today and asked me how to load the dishwasher. Okay. So I'm like, okay, so they've asked you to load the dishwasher twice. Have you recorded that process? Is it written down somewhere? Is there a video for this? It's like, no. So go and get your phone. Go and grab your phone right now, record a video, send us the video. We'll build it to a private page and we'll stick a QR code on the front. It's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. He's never, ever shown them again how to load the dishwasher.
There's so many things that you can make easy.
Exactly. And you just find that sometimes people overcomplicate it, or they don't know where to start. Where do what's your thought?
It's a combination. There's definitely some overcomplicating because, again, as an owner, you're like, this whole rule book, I got to follow all these rules. Well, the new teacher feels the same way. The new teacher feels the same way.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have to remember how you feel and not dump that on that new teacher. Let them learn and grow. And I get it. You need them to learn. You want them to do all these things. But a lot of us, if we're honest, when we're having fun, we're in a space where we feel loved, we're in a place where we feel appreciated, you honestly do a little bit of homework on your own so that you can learn as well. And I think when you bring in some of these teachers and not make them feel like, figure it out, save my life, I'm dumping you in this room and I need you to do all these things. If they at least feel like, if I save her, she's got my back. If I save her, she's going to keep teaching me. I like this. I'm going to learn a little bit more so I can save her saving me. Then it goes. But you have to be realistic about these new teachers. You cannot dump on them. Like, no one likes to be dumped. And I'm not a mom, but my mom always yells at me about things that I did when I was younger. Now that I'm an adult and I come home like, oh my gosh, I sat in traffic. I need to sit down for a second. And she's like, remember when I would come in and you'd ask for help with your homework? You'd ask what we're eating for dinner and you ask what you dump on people. That's how teachers feel. They're in this room with 10 2-year-olds by themselves. Their noses are running. They're climbing on things. You don't know where the paper is. You don't know where the glue is. They don't know the schedule. And now you're telling someone, remember to do the lesson plan for today. That it's overwhelming. Yeah. Let them come in if possible. And I get it, not always possible. Have another teacher with them. Stay as the director or the assistant director or the owner. Go in the room with them. Be a part of their development. Make sure that they have the tools in place. Make sure they have toys. Make sure they have paper and pencil. Make sure that they have a schedule. A lot of the things that come as behavior problems, a lot of times is a resource problem. It's not always the kid is bad or difficult. They don't have enough toys. They don't have age-appropriate toys. It's not just the teacher isn't trained. That does play into it. But it's not all of that. It's just a matter of not always having all the tools and resources there.
There's one point you mentioned there about the team. Do you find sometimes directors tell rather than coach? So, for example, something happens in the center, and then they go in and just tell them what to do rather than actually coach them through it so they actually learn themselves. Do you see that a lot?
Absolutely, because and we all do it. sometimes it's easier to just give the answer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and a lot of times you got to let people walk through the why. So instead of saying, don't leave that child on the changing table, you want to say, hey, it's best that you don't leave a child on the changing table because we don't want them to fall. We don't want them to jump off. It's not safe. It gives, it gives them the wrong impression. We want to make sure diaper changes look like this. You give them the why, and not necessarily yelling at them, because again, too, when you yell at someone, they probably don't even hear the first part of what you said because their heart
Yeah.
is racing so fast.
Yeah, totally.
But you want to make your moments coachable moments, not just don't moments, because I have noticed that when I talk to even owners and they're explaining scenarios that happen in their program, they're like, we can't do this, but they don't know why.
Yes.
Somewhere previously they were told we don't do this, and that's what they think,
So
but they don't know why.
there's no understanding whatsoever to that point.
Right.
Yeah.
I did a training this weekend, and there was this big talk on we can't turn the lights off at nap time. And so my question back was, why? And they're like, it's in the rule book. It's not in the rule book. We can turn the lights on at nap time. Can you?
Yeah.
Why can't you? Like, why do you think that you can't? But a lot of people think that you can't because in their mind it's just pitch black.
Totally. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the lights off or the lights on debate really is determined on what your room looks like.
Yeah, totally.
Is it pitch black, or do you have a classroom with windows that completely surround your room? It's not dark. Even if you turn the lights off, there's still so much light in the room you can adequately supervise. But a lot of people believe no, yes, they don't know why.
Yeah.
Definitely explaining the why. That's a common one. We don't do that here. Why?
Yeah,
And then a lot of people think, why is a person being sassy with them? They're not. They want to know why.
Yeah, totally. I remember we had an example in our childcare center, and it was the director. We'd sat down with her going, hey, look, one of the things we're trying to encourage you to do more is coach the team. Like, they need to understand the why behind things. And she goes, yeah, I get it. I know I need to work on that. And literally 2 minutes later, she walked out. She walked into one of the rooms and a child fell over a chair. And the first thing she did, she went in straight away, and it was just a little, just tripped. Okay, really simple. The first thing she did is, right, we need to move that chair. We need to do this. We need to do that. She didn't actually explain any of the basics behind it at all. She didn't understand, right, guys, let's understand. So talk me through why that happened. Okay, so what do you think we now need to do about that to make sure that doesn't happen again? There was none of that. And I looked at her and smiled, and she went, oh, yeah, you're right. Totally missed it. And I just, if anyone gets anything from today, I just encourage all of you to start to think about coach your team, because otherwise you'll forever be always telling people. You'll
always be like this.
Exactly. All the time. It's always going to be the same.
Yeah.
So,
and the thing is, when you coach your team, sometimes when you have another teacher with another teacher, she can share that coaching moment when you aren't there. Like, oh, we don't do that because this could happen. Or one time when we were here, that happened. The why is those 5 minutes that you took can be 50 minutes cumulatively later because you've now explained the why.
Yeah, totally. So what would be your top 3 tips on if people are worrying right now, or they've got inspections coming up, or anything that they're concerned about? What are your top 3 tips that you would give someone right now to take away off the back of this podcast?
My one that's the least popular is read the rule book. Okay, we all have our childcare experience, but one thing that I can say, when I started working for state, I thought I knew the rules, and once I actually had the task of reading the rule book, you realize what the rules are. And 2, when you have instances where you need to reference the rule, it's easier to find the rule because you're now familiar with the book, right? Do not take all of your hundreds of years of experience and count that as your rule book. There are real guidelines that exist, and you need to follow them. And then being familiar with your state person. I know in Georgia, that rule book is revised quite a bit. If you look at it now, I think it said it had an update in October. It's constantly being revised. Be on the mailing list so you can get the updates on the small things. Again, if you're getting the one rule update here and the 2 later on down the line, it's not so overwhelming because you got 1 here, 1 later versus, oh, your state person showed up and you weren't aware of that 1 rule. So now you're completely thrown off from 1 thing that
Yeah.
was preventable.
Yeah.
Learn the rules. 2, once you learn the rules, share it. So a lot of people go to trainings and they get all this good information and they're so excited about it, and then they hold on to it.
Yeah.
Share it with your team. I get it. Again, I'm always big on not dumping, but paraphrase or put things in a staff meeting, spread it out, have a newsletter, have, just have in basic dialogue. Sometimes when you're passing by or you're helping them, doing whatever, maybe at nap time, you can share some of the things that you learn. If all the kids are down, I'm not taking you away from supervising, but there's times where we talk to our co-teachers and our peers. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the things that you learn, model some of the behaviors that you learn. So at least if you can't always talk about it, they can see how you're doing it.
Yeah, totally.
And I just definitely, I'm a big fan on educating your team, having staff meetings. I know after COVID, we fell in love with the idea of virtual and newsletters and sending things in an email, but you need to have meetings with your team, live meetings. Let them ask their questions. Let them go through their scenarios so that they can learn. And sometimes you do need to bring in an outside person. At the end of the day, you're still the owner, you're still their boss. And as much as you think you're cool, there's still a little bit of fear in you about who you are. You could fire them.
Yeah.
They're now saying something that they're doing wrong out loud. Bringing in an outside neutral person that they can ask their questions to, get some of their scenarios out so they can learn. Because that's the ultimate goal. You want them to learn. You want them to stay after you've spent all this time answering their questions and giving them the why and all these things. You want them to stay.
Yeah, totally.
Training them and building and growing and pouring into them, that's what makes people stay. It's not the money. Everybody's done the research at this point.
Yeah.
Other childcare brands, other non-childcare employers, everyone knows it's not about the money. It's how you make people feel.
Exactly. I love that. And one last thing I'm going to add to that, if you don't mind. I remember within our business, one of the big things we'd actually have a challenge between each room. So we'd go round, we'd have it diarized. So it'd be every week. They wouldn't know when it was going to happen, but we'd go round and we'd be like, okay, it's quiz. And we would do a challenge between the different rooms, the different age groups. And we'd throw random questions out from the rule guy, the rule books, and we'd get a score, and then we'd get a room winner off the back of that. So there was always that element of the spot checks, but also it was incentivized that people always need to be on their toes, ready for it.
Right.
Those questions could come at any time, but there was also then rewards and incentives because that particular room did so well in terms of answering that too. So yeah, I love that. Totally agree with you, on the same page. So what's the best way? If people want to find out more about working with you, just getting more content from you, how do they connect with you? Tell everyone if you don't mind.
Well, I'm on social media. So if you go to Instagram, I am the State Lady, THE State Lady. Some people say duh, not the, but it's the State Lady. And then on Facebook, I am Culturally Yours Consulting and Training. And then I have my website. So if you go to the website, you can book that way as well.
Awesome. Because obviously there's lots of great things you do. Tell everyone, if you don't, what's the core kind of thing that you do in terms of service right now where you can help people out? What's the main thing you do?
So right now I'm really big on training. So whether I come to your school and do like a staff meeting, and if you're in Georgia and Texas, in Florida, I'm able to give you the clock hours. So yeah, I told you earlier, but I didn't announce it. I am approved in Texas now to give clock hours, but I can come in and do that sit down standard training with your staff. And then I have a school that I've been working with. I actually came in, did a mock visit first. So I went in, did a mock state inspection, went into all their classrooms, came up with a full report, and then I came back and I was able to do their clock hours or their staff training, because now I had that firsthand experience of what they were doing, because the staff was completely confused. Like, some of them thought I was so bright from the start. Some of them thought I was a new employee. Like, everyone was so confused. I only announced myself with my name. And so, I didn't give a lot of leeway on what I was doing, but I did do a full-fledged inspection inside of the facility. So you do that, walk through, and then I come back and I can do like a staff training and walk you through the things that I saw, as well as just general rules as well, because you don't always want to just harp on what they do wrong. You want to prevent some things in the future as well.
Totally. That's one thing we did in our business. We brought people in to do those mock inspections first, and then deliver the train off the back end. They'd find stuff that we didn't find. And we wanted people to spot check that. And I don't think there's anything more valuable in terms of from an inspection point of view than bringing someone in to actually give you that first-hand opinion on what they see first,
Right.
and then reiterate that back to the team and share why you found those particular points. I love that. So look, we could stay on here forever talking about this because there's so much to talk about. But I am extremely grateful for you jumping on. As always, you share such amazing value. And
Thanks
if you
for
guys are
having
thinking
me.
about, no, not at all. If you guys are thinking about anything around getting help and support, make sure you guys connect. Show some love and appreciation down below. If there's any questions as well, I'm sure we'd be happy to answer those. If there's anything down below that you have advice, you want some more support on, drop them down below. And of course, you guys can go watch the replay if you just joined us too. But I'm so grateful for you joining us again. And hopefully we'll connect in another couple of months and get some more training to, share the latest updates that's going on too.
I look forward to it.
Thanks for
I
joining
can't
me
wait to
again.
see you.